Our next speaker is John Jackson, former chairman and president of the Society of Postal Historians, and John has collected philatelic literature, including auction catalogues, for a very long time and continues to add to his collections. He and I, for a number of years, have collaborated in our pursuit of good catalogues to add to our collections. I should say, we both like a good box. He is a member of the Collections Committee and actively assists in acquisitions for the Society's library holdings. John, over to you.
Right, good morning, everybody. No, it's good afternoon now. We've heard a very interesting first session. Mine is intended to be a bit lighter, and it's really a story of my collecting habits with auction catalogues. It all started back in 1967. I just left school and I was interested in postal history, and I decided to take a subscription to Robson Low Postal History Auctions. And they were the days when you had to pay for your catalogues. But it was also the days before buyer's premium, which was also rather nice, which came in England in the mid-1970s. So although I wasn't that wealthy a buyer, being I'd just joined a Barclays Bank as a bank clerk, so but I like the catalogues. And the one on the left is the first catalogue, I think. It's the right period, it's late 1967. And on the cover, you'll see that most wonderful cover with a mailboat cancellation and a combination New South Wales GB, which I think ended up in the Debus sale, which Colin Feeler sold a year or two ago, Hugh Wood's sale. Now, it's a lovely cover. And we fast forward about 10 years, and in the late 1970s, I was working in Oakham, a very nice town, only 10 miles from where I live. And there was a gentleman there, we had a customer called Edward Follambe, the Earl of Liverpool, or Eddie Liverpool for short. And he was married to one of the daughters of the Earl of Gainsborough, who's the local Lord of the Manor in Rutland. So one day I was talking to Eddie, and I said, "Did you sell some postal history 10, 12 years ago?" And he said, "Yes." And he had sold, that was the family correspondence. They kept the letters, there were photocopies with the covers, but all the covers were sold in that Robson Low sale. So that was it, that was nice context. And then a few years later, early 1980s, I'd been in correspondence with Tom Roberts. Now, Tom was a big man on manuscript cancellations. Wonderful catalogue sold by Christie's in the late 1980s after he died. And he invited me to visit him in the Lake District. He lived in a very nice village. So when I was on a walking trip, I booked in a local pub, went for dinner. And he got a few albums out of the bank safe deposit. And we were looking at them, and it happened to be the mailboat cancellations. And there was that cover. So I actually got to see it in the flesh. And he had bought it from Martin Wilcox. Martin Wilcox had bought it in the sale, and he had soon after, I think, subsequently bought it. Now, Tom Roberts was a big collector of French mailboats, sold by Sotheby's in the early 80s. He died in about 1986, 87. His manuscript collection was exhibited here, I think posthumously. And then it was sold by Christie's. That's a great reference catalogue. But this cover was part of his maritime collection. That never came on the market. Richie Bodley was the Philatelic executor or Philatelic advisor, and he sold all the maritime material, and there was some wonderful stuff privately, and I presume it was sold privately to Hugh Wood at that time. So that's a nice provenance for that cover. And I've always admired it. I shall never own it, but it's a lovely cover. And there, so that's my start of my postal history auction catalogues. When I took early retirement in 2000, and I've continued them up until they petered out, I thought, well, let's try and complete the postal history catalogue. So I was quite lucky. I got some nice lots of early ones, and over a period of about 10 years, I just about got there. And the one I was missing was the one on the right. Austrian cancellations from, I think, 1945. And at that period, 1943, 44, 45, very difficult for the Robson Lowe sales because of the paper shortages in England and that sort of thing. Anyway, eBay comes along, and everything comes up on eBay eventually. And then about 6 years ago, it appeared on eBay, the catalogue, the Austrian cancellations. Well, no, 6 years ago. No, it's before COVID, yeah. So, you know, it was a must to buy. So I put a massive snipe bid on, you know, eye-watering snipe. It was very modestly estimated. And there was one other bidder. No, who's sitting in the room here? After the sale, I could work it out from his feedback number. And of course, it's my good friend Martin Sundberg was also bidding on it because he collects these as well. But I was desperate, so I bought it. Anyway, so I now have a complete collection of Robson Lowe postal history sales, which are quite scarce to complete. It's an interesting property. That's how my initial interest came about. In retirement in the 2000s, I thought, well, why not look at famous collectors and their catalogue? So that's how we get going now on the next one. Now, the guide, I found this pair of books are a great read. If you want to take a pair of philatelic books on holiday to read, take these two. They are interesting, well written. Each chapter goes into the next, and it's something you can pick up and put down again. And they were okay, David doesn't not so keen. Well, I like them, and it gives you a good background to the collectors. Let's get the right one. The other guide is John Michael's monograph that was published by Spink in 2003 on provenances, because in there they deal with, you'll see the right-hand slide is, right-hand scan is deals with some famous collectors, and that was also a good guide. That was a very good work by John Michael. If anybody wants to collect British Commonwealth and you want to find some background, he does go through each colony, a territory, and list all the major sales. And it's not completely comprehensive, but it's very good. And there's also a full listing of the De La Rue archive sales in there as well. So Spink did a good job publishing that in 2003. And I think it's probably still available. So that was my guides. Now, early catalogues are not easy to find, and as a result, there's nothing from the 19th century on famous sales, because a lot of the big collections were privately sold in that time. The first one I've got there is fairly well known. It's almost a private treaty brochure written by the well-known dealer Peckett, who bought William Avery's collection. William Avery was of the Scale family in Birmingham, manufacturers in Birmingham, and it was a lot of money at the time, £24,500. It must be well into three figures now in current terms, and it was reckoned to be the second to the Tapling collection in the UK. So that was a major coup for Peckett. Well, that's the first item I've got. Now, the first collection I would like, because I don't have it, it's the only item in this presentation that I don't own, this is a Royals copy, is a Seabold collection of 1910, largely because it is the first postal history sale. There's a lot of postal history in it. I've never seen a copy for sale, but for anybody who's into the postal history, all the covers has his hand stamp on the reverse, which is quite unusual. But if anybody's got a spare set, see me afterwards. It's number one, well, it's joint number one on my wants list, put it like that. So the other item is a text of the first Luder Edelman sale, text only.
Will it come up on eBay eventually?
Yeah, well, yes, everything comes on eBay, or it seems to. I really start with a Ferrari set, the 14 sales of France, sold in France in the early 1920s. Jonas has also mentioned in his set, I've got an unbound set and also the well-known facsimile. Now that is a really good book, in my opinion. If you want a copy of everything connected with the Ferrari sales, the Napier Index is in there, the Luder Edelman sale is in there, and it's a good quality publication. It was published, I think, in 1987. It was remaindered in the 2000s, because I remember picking copies up from German eBay for not very much money, but they've gone to ground now. But they still come up. But it should be in any collector's library, I think, that facsimile. And then there's the famous Luder Edelman sale in 1929. That's quite scarce. In two parts. The second part is the illustrations, and I find it quite interesting that Luder Edelman, it's a forerunner of Coin Feeler, but even in the 1920s there was a bound volume of plates with each catalogue, softbound, separate volume. Now that's quite unusual. In England in the 20s, the auction catalogues had hardly any illustrations in. Harmer's did odd plates, but there were very, very little. And it applied not only to Luder Edelman, but also to Kohler's and the Hungarian collector, dealer, auctioneer. Bella Secula, thank you for that. Yeah. The name had just escaped me. He did similar, but he was a bit of a crook, I think, from what I hear. But anyway, they're a nice pair. Let's go on. Now, the next one I quite like is Manus. He was a Dutchman, despite his rather English name. Big tobacco manufacturer or processor, very wealthy man, and you look at his year dates, he was born in 1851 and started collecting in 1860, so he went back to the very early days, and of course it was British Commonwealth, this series of sales, and I've got quite a nice bound volume, of which that's just one of them. He did own a couple of Post Office Mauritius, so it puts him in a certain strata of collections at the time. So that's a good one. The next one, which is quite a scarce one, Prapoportovich, wonderful mint stamps, again British Commonwealth in the 5 sales. Great reference, I would have thought, for auctioneers today. But not an easy set of catalogues to find. Plumberage is quite difficult from the 20s and 30s. You find Harmer's, but not Plumberage. I don't know too much about the Prapoportovich, his background, but his catalogues are nice. Next one, much more interesting story-wise, is good old Arthur Hind. Not a very nice man, I get the impression from reading about it. Didn't treat his wife very nicely either. So he had made a lot of money. He was English Yorkshireman, gone over to America, made money in the motor industry within the fabric side of it. After he'd been a big buyer at Ferrari, he'd outbid Burris for the British Guiana 1 cent. When he died, his executors, one of whom, or the Philatelic advisors, one of whom was Charles Phillips, the former owner of Gibbons, who had emigrated to America around 1920, I think, and operated as a dealer. They had a sale of US material which wasn't successful. Now, you must remember this was during the Depression. So they were a little bit, the executors were a little bit worried about it. And Phillips prepared the Commonwealth sale, illustrated on the left there. But in the interim, Henry Rebel Harmer shot over to America, not by plane, but by boat, fronting a syndicate, including Robson Lowe, Hind's nephew, and I think a guy called Thompson. And Harmer negotiated with the executors and bought the Hind collection, except what had already been sold. And I think Phillips must have been a bit miffed, to say the least. And you still find that Phillips catalogue. It's still a nice catalogue. There's a separate volume of illustrations with it. Anyway, Harmer came back with it. There was quite a lot of publicity in the newspapers and whatnot at the time. And he had a very successful series of sales. There's one shown there. They're all that similar format. But the two, well, one scarce item I found on the left-hand side is the French edition of the French and colonist stamps. You don't see that very often. And there's the pair of housebound volumes. Now, the British Guiana wasn't found at the time, and Mrs. Hind got hold of it, and I think there was a bit of a legal battle over it. But in the end, it ended up in England being offered for sale in the sale on the right-hand side in 35. Oh yeah, I can see it. Yeah, it's 35. Yeah, by Harmer Rook. It didn't sell, and it went back to America and was eventually sold, I think, in 1940, and it appeared in auction in 1970. So it sort of it finishes off the Hind story, which let's go to the next one. The other famous series from this period is the Stevens sale. Very nice quality. Stevens, as in Stevens inks. I remember when I was in the bank, and every morning you had to fill up the inkwells, and it was always Stevens inks, and that's where Michael Stevens got his money from, and that was sold after he died. Then we come to, well, the most fun collection that I quite liked putting together. That was Colonel Green. Now, Colonel Green was a character, to say the least. He wasn't a philatelist. He was a collector. But he was a very rich collector. His mother owned vast properties in America. She was a very mean woman. Kept him on a fairly short leash early in life, I think. But after she died, well, no, let's go back a little bit. During in his early life when he'd had an accident and he had a bad leg, and she was too mean to get proper medical attention, so he lost his leg. So he went through life with one leg. The leg was buried in the family plot. When Colonel Green died 40 odd years later, it was resurrected and it was included, he had it back again in death. Yeah, so, which is quite funny. Anyway, Hetty Green died in 1915, and the Colonel Green and his sister inherited. And I think the figure was about 100 million he got. And it was like a kid with being let loose in the sweet shop. He collected stamps in enormous quantities, he collected coins, he collected yachts, he collected pornography, he liked to help young ladies through college. He was I always get the feeling he was a very amiable bloke. Yeah, and a good bloke to go out for a few beers with. But it was a sad life, really, in my opinion. You know, he married, he met his wife in the red light district of Chicago, took her on as his mistress until after his mother had died, and then married her. And I think they got on all right. He had a reasonably happy marriage after that. But his collecting was, well, he just bought vast quantities of stamps. Robson Lowe knew him, and I read somewhere that when Robbie Lowe married, he was given a copy of the Inverted Jenny as a wedding present, because Colonel Green had acquired the sheet after it had been discovered, and it furnished Robbie Lowe's first house. So, he was generous man, I think. He was a very tall, 6'4", nearly 300 pounds, a big man. Yeah. Anyway, the sales. He died in 35. The executors were very worried about the effect on the market. They didn't quite know what to do. They thought it could collapse the market because of the quantity. But they did, by 42, they did have some sales. I think they had 7 sales initially to see how things went, and they went very well. It was wartime and there was an appetite. And in the end, there were 29 catalogues, 28 sales, because one catalogue was in 2 parts, and it was 50,000 lots, which is an enormous quantity. And there were, I think, 8 auction houses involved, 8 or 9. So I'm showing just 3 examples there, and on the next frame there's some more: Morgenthau, Fairfield, Castales, all well-known American auction houses from the 30s and 40s and 50s. Yeah. Right, the next one, let's get back to GB. Robert Yardley, very nice, very good collector, one of our greatest. One could even argue one of the greatest, but it depends how you view Bacon. Yes, his bottom picture down there, bottom picture on the right-hand column. He was of the Yardley soap and perfume family. I think he was a lawyer because he'd been called to the bar. He had been born, I think, in 1850 or 1860, so he went back to quite very early days. And he was a great philatelist, scientific. He helped put philately on a scientific basis in the UK. The sales after he died were held by Harmers, and these are what we call the baby Harmers, the late wartime, very small size catalogues. There's some on display downstairs. They're very scarce to collect, baby Harmers. The Yardley series is a set of 7, which covers all his collecting interests, which were extremely diverse. He was really interested in anything really difficult, you know, it's Jammu and Kashmir or Turkey or, yeah, which really puts him on a really high level as a philatelist. Yeah. Well, I'll just show my, we've got to talk about a little bit about Caspari. He was a stockbroker in America. He didn't lose money during the Depression and the collapse, or he didn't lose very much. He'd been a big buyer from the Ferrari days onwards. His main collection was USA, which is the, I forget which one it is now, I think it's the blue, the one on the left, catalogue. That's the set of 16 sales that were held by Harmers in 1955 to 58. One of the great collections. He had a wonderful eye for quality. He was quite a secretive collector. He didn't have many agents. He did work with some dealers, but the great thing is his quality. It was largely classics pre-1870, and one very well-known auction describer in the UK told me, if it's ex-Caspari, it's probably the best around. Probably. If it's ex-Burris, you look at it twice. That was a comment from a auction describer. But anyway, yeah, it's a great collection, Caspari.
He committed suicide.
What, Caspari?
Yes.
Oh, the only one who committed suicide I thought was Sebald. Yes, did he really? He was quite an elderly man. Yeah, okay. Yes, I didn't realise. That's not mentioned in Bierman.
Of course not.
Oh, of course not. Okay. Yeah. 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 Let's talk a few minutes about I think one of the great collections of the 20th century, and that's the Liechtenstein Boydale collections. Liechtenstein died in 1947. He was Sieber Geigy, the Swiss engineering chemical firm. So a very wealthy man. He'd been a big buyer in Ferrari and the later sales. He was, to my mind, he was far more a collector I can warm to, because he liked postal history. He did the proofs, he did the stamps, you know, in quite a way that perhaps wasn't done so much in earlier days. Now, regarding the sales, we all know about Dale Liechtenstein's sales, but they started much earlier than you think. And there's 3 of them. The earliest from 1950, which was express covers, and then these were sales by his daughter, and then part of his Canada collection and some European covers. European countries, not cover collection. There's 6 sales, I think, from this pre-death of his daughter period. So they're quite an interesting forerunner. After his daughter died quite young in 1957, yes, I think it's 1967. Yeah, she was in her 50s, so quite a young, and she was a keen collector herself. But the collection was left to various, mainly charitable groups, and so it didn't all come on the market in one go. And there was three tranches that you can look at. The first one was in 1968 to 70, which is the British North America and some British Empire. It included the Mauritius and South America. So as you can see, very diverse. Then that was 1970. Then in 1989, the next series, 11 sales in 10 catalogues, all by Harmers again. And you can see I'm just showing the Switzerland, the Bavaria, and the Cape of Good Hope there. And then finally, What have I done? What have I done? Yeah. Yeah, so then the final tranche, which was which didn't finish until 2004, again by H.R. Harmer, and they were very good sales, especially the last one, the Pony Express. A fantastic collection, small collection but very valuable. So that was a series of sales that went from 1950 up to 2004. You know, not many of us, it takes them 50 odd years to sell. It can be beaten, that figure can, but then very briefly is Lilly, Josiah Lilly of the E.J. Lilly Company, pharmaceutical company in America. He was the chief executive owner. How are we doing? Yeah. He was a good collector, but he had a lot. He was very secretive. He apparently every year he cashed in $1 million worth of E.J. Lilly stock to finance his purchases for the coming year. Now, $1 million in the 50s is a lot of money, but he had other interests as well. He was into coins, and he was also into toy soldiers. I don't think he liked that term, but you know, I presume wargaming. But he was very keen on mint stamps, and he had been a big buyer in a lot of sales. They're a good set, and again, it's by Seagulls. Not up to the standard of the current Seagulls catalogues that we saw a few minutes ago, but still, they're a good set of sales. Yeah. Right, let's go to the next one. Boas, wonderful. This is the one you can go to town on, to a certain extent. Boas had been he was another tobacco magnate from Alsace. He'd been a great buyer in Ferrari and all through the 30s and onwards. He'd started to sell, and he sold privately to Shanahan's auction, the famous Ponzi scheme of the GB in Netherlands. The sale never went ahead, and that's the catalogue that never happened. There was a burglary in Ireland, and as a result, the firm collapsed. It went into liquidation, and those two collections were sold by Robson Lowe, who dealt with most of the Boas sales, or a good chunk of them, later. But I think at that time they would have been owned by the liquidator. But yeah, but the book on the other part of the scan is another, I think, really good read. It's Wolfgang Masson's recent work on the Shanahan auctions, and it's, you know, how not to run an auction company. I think, yeah, the only interesting, amusing thing that I found in it was there was rumours that he was he gave quite well-known parties, did Shanahan, at the time of the auctions, that he was flying in plane loads of ladies from Paris to make the parties go with a bit of oomph. And I thought that was quite a good marketing initiative. Anyway, the main sales after Boas had died, the first one was Willy Blaze from Belgium, and there's a couple of the more unusual ones, a Morriman sale, and they were mainly, I said handled by Robson Lowe, but there was also Mondolfo, a big name, big time Italian dealer, was heavily involved, and it was all done through a trust company in Liechtenstein. But Herbert Trenchard has wrote many years ago now, a magnificent article on Boas. It wasn't entirely correct at the time on the Boas sales, and he lists about 70 sales. I'm up to about 50 odd now, so I'm getting there. Some are you never see, never see, but most are quite common. The Robson Low sales on the early set are normally in this format. And as you can see, the other problem with Robbie at that time, he'd do 3 or 4 Boas sales, completely different countries, and even foreign and British Empire, and then he'd do a volume of plates for all the sales. So it's, you know, if you're a single country collector, you've got to break a set of the sales to get the plates. It's annoying. Oh, so, let's go back. Oh, where we are. No, go back. That's 3 of the other more unusual Boas sales. The only one that Coinfila gets a mention in at the time, it's a Naktrag supplement to sale, I think, 49, which had this Afghanistan in. And there's a sale from Van Dieten's in Holland with a Curaçao and Suriname, and the Harmaruk sale from of USA that was held in the USA, in New York. And then some of the very odd ones, or well, not odd ones, but difficult ones. The Bournemouth, Robbie Lowe put some material through Bournemouth sales, and Bournemouth catalogues very hard to find because they were ephemeral. And that one, he sold a load of the mint stamps. The Japan sale you don't see so often, and certainly the Roume catalogue there is difficult to find. It was very well spread around. And Robbie did sell some countries privately, private treaty, which were then subsequently sold by the new buyers. So that's all, they can also be included. Now almost at the end, now we come to, I think, what's probably one of the greatest collectors of the 20th century, and it's one you don't hear about. Baron Alphonse de Rothschild. He had an amazing quantity of European collections. He collected everything Europe pretty well. He started selling in the mid-30s. Herbert Trenchard wrote about the series of sales in the PLR, Philatelic Literature Review, in 1998, very authoritative article, but 6 years later he completely rewrote it with another 20 or so catalogues added. And that's your problem. His listing is now over 80 catalogue sales for Alphonse de Rothschild. And he reckons it started with Harmer's in 1936, the sale on the left there. There's no mention of the render, so that's the problem with it all. But it was apparently, he said it was described by Otto Friedel, who was a well-known collector from Vienna, where Rothschild came from. Friedel was working for Harmer's at the time, and there were quite a few apparently Rothschild material in Harmer's during the period 36 to 39, 40. And the sale on the right there is one of the famous sales of German states covers, and that was certainly Rothschild. Now, Friedel went over to America. He was joined by a dealer called Edwin Muller, who was an author of books on Austria and postmarks, very well-known dealer, very good authority on classics. And they worked for Bartels in America, and apparently for a 3-year period, a lot of Rothschild material came through Bartels. Now, I've got no Bartels catalogues. Then they set up a company called Mercury Stamp Company in New York, and they then marketed through Mercury, Edwin Muller marketed through Mercury a lot of Rothschild material. and Trenchard does go through all the catalogues in quite some detail. And Mercury Stamp Company is quite an important company, but not easy to collect, auction catalogues. I've got a bundle of them, but they're not easy to find. And there were a lot of funny things went on. A lot of material was sold privately, which Trenchard has gone into because Bocker was involved, and Trenchard was able to interview Bocker before he died. There was also at some of the early sales, and we're talking early 50s, there was a very mysterious buyer at the Mercury Stamp Company sales, Mr. X. Nobody knew him, but he bought a lot of material. And it appears it was the family buying back in auction the material that wasn't making the money. It's a very, the second article by Trenchard is well worth reading. And it's because of that we then get to the bit of Rothschilds that is very easy to collect, which is the Phillips sale. David Boyd got a handle onto the Rothschilds family, and it's probably the best thing he did in his career at Phillips. And the first sale was the famous Norwegian sale, which had the big famous used block in. That's definitely Rothschild. And then the rest of the sales were named, and they were the Italian states, and you'll see two there. I'm only showing a few of them. The Greek sale, and then the last sale in 1996. So there we've got a collection that started selling in 1936 and finished selling in 1996. So that's 60 years at it, which is going some. And the material's marvellous, I think. You know, it really is good. The Sicily is rated, I've read somewhere, that it was probably the best single country sale ever formed, was the Rothschild Sicily, which included the full sheets, which are now in a museum. But there were 6 parts of it, 5 or 6 parts in Phillips of Sicily. It was so it was that important. That brings me up to more or less the end of the 20th century. I'm not going to show any more slides about the 21st century, but it's been a good period the last 25 years, because we've had Bailey, of course, from Sotheby's. We've had William Fraser from Spink. Now the Fraser sale, which, okay, is British Empire. Well, most of what we've been talking about have been worldwide, but a well-known British Commonwealth dealer said to me, he said, I find the Fraser catalogues much more useful than the Bailey catalogues, which I found quite an interesting. So that's an interesting comment, as a dealer, because of course William Fraser was a well-known dealer. And of course since then we've had the famous sales from Kohler and Coinfield, the Howe, and of course the Debus, and you've been selling the Besançon now for 6 years, 6, 7 years. So there's some really nice big collections been on the market in the 21st century. And I will finish with one, might be a slightly contentious slide. Might be two gentlemen on the front row might be having something to say to me at the end of this. But anyway, I mean, we've all been following Besançon, anybody who's interested in British colonies particularly. And Coinfield started in 2016 with the French collection, and it's been continued with the British colonies ever since. Well, anybody who's interested in British colonies, there's two things strike you. If he's collected all this material, where's his British North America and where's his Southeast Asia? You see, so there are two big areas which weren't covered. Well, but you know, listening to gossip, and been talking to nobody who works for you. Don't worry. Said to me, of course, the Besançon Southeast Asia was the Sentosa sale by Spink in 2015 in Singapore, and the Besançon British North America is the Highland collection sold by Eastern Auctions in 2018-19 in 3 sales, which is really what you need. Am I correct there? Oh, thank you. Which is really what you need if you want to collect a full collection of Besançon catalogues, you see. You've got to have it all. And they're nice catalogues. The Eastern Auctions in particular, a very nice series of sales. I won't comment on the Sentosa particularly, but well, why not? Okay, okay, I will. No, it was sold at, just after the or during the exhibition in Singapore, and of course it was how should we say? The rest of the trade weren't particularly happy, the retail trade, because nobody was spending money because they were all waiting for the auction. Yes. So it was I think it was a problem, I think, for that exhibition, having such a big, it was 1,600 lots in one hit. You know, biggest lot of Southeast Asia that had been put up all in one go. But anyway, a lot of famous things in it. But that's Besançon, my take on it anyway. And any of the other collectors of auction catalogues, you now know what you need to look for. Anyway, I think we'll call it a day. It's lunchtime. Have we got time for any questions? Yeah, okay, yeah. There's time if anybody wants to ask me anything.
John? Am I on? No. Yes, John, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for John?
Paul. Yeah.
Just one question, John. How many of your catalogues have actually got prices realised with them?
Well, most of the bound sets normally have. It's when you've got loose ones where it tends to be a bit more problematical. But you can always photocopy them if the Royals got them, you know, or you can ask Spink nicely in their reference collection. So they are available. Yeah, mostly anyway. Yeah. Yes.
Any other questions? Yep, good, thank you.
Yes. Do you happen to know when auction catalogues first used colour and when they first had estimates?
Colour? I'm thinking of UK. I have a feeling it was the Ceylon sale, Harmer's Ceylon, or the famous just before the war.
No, it's pre-Percy de Worms, about 1910. There's a catalogue with one colour plate.
Oh, is there? Okay, yes, okay, that I'm aware. I'm thinking of the Percy de Worms Ceylon sale. I think that's got some colour in it. I can't remember any of the British ones having colour in. I don't think Coin Feeler. It's Coin Feeler by then. I've got the early Coin Feelers. I never looked for whether they were colour or not. Doubtful. Do you know what sale it was, James? What sale it was in 19...
I can't remember. All I know is I've got the catalogue.
Oh!
Somewhere. And you've seen it.
Yeah, okay.
Another question, and then we're looking to go to lunch. If anybody else has got a question? John, it looks like you might be getting away very easy. Any that you'd like to collect apart from Seabold?
Well, I do collect early Coin Feeler. Lulu Edelman.
Yeah, you're one missing.
Yes, I'm one missing from Lulu Edelman. Just the text. I've got the pictures for number one. Bought at your sale. Misdescribed. Recently as well.
Now, did it not come with provenance, John?
No. It's I didn't realise until I bought it. Yeah, no, it was in a bound volume. So yeah, it was good. No, I like Mercury Stamp Company. Those are, I like to collect those. Yeah, but I haven't found any for a few years now. They don't appear on eBay. You'd think an American auction house, but it was mainly European material. So I would imagine most of the catalogues were sent overseas. They would turn up, but they don't. You know, it's odd, really. You know, some new, yeah.
I think, John, basically you can say that you and I have dropped a clanger. We should have had some printed out once lists. We could have handed out. I mean, what a mistake to make.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much, John. I think it's been a wonderful morning. Thank you for presenting
Thank
this
you.
morning.